Zeal for your house has consumed me. These words were written by David in trying times. When he wrote them, it wasn't the first time he had been consumed with passion or zeal for God's house and name, and it most likely wasn't the last. David was a man after God's own heart. Once when he was bringing provisions to his brothers in the war, he heard a Philistine slandering God's people on the battlefield. Everyone in Israel's army was too terrified of this giant to fight, but the words ignited a fury in David. You probably remember the rest. Armed with 5 smooth stones and a sling, David stood up against the blasphemer Goliath and defended his people and his God. 1,000 years after David slayed Goliath, another man came forward to defend the Lord. Called the Son of David, this man's ministry was blessed by God and ordained from the beginning. He was Jesus. When we read in John 2 that Jesus was visiting the temple for Passover, he became inflamed by what he saw. Money changers and animal sellers were inside the temple in the court of the Gentiles, negotiating deals in a place that should have been dedicated to worshiping God. Passion for God's house consumed Jesus, and he drove these people out of the temple. When they saw these things, Jesus' disciples remembered immediately David's words. Can you imagine how David and Jesus must have loved God to defend his name, his house, and his people like that? They were walking, breathing testimonies for God, living proof of his character. Can the same be said about us? If I'm honest, I am often more zealous about my Broncos than I am about God and his work in my life, because I love football, but God is mightier than the Broncos. And if I can stand beside a football team that doesn't yet have a starting quarterback for 2017, how much more should I be able to stand by my God? How much more should I desire that my life, my walk, would example his love to others? 73 of the Psalms are attributed to David, who, in contrast to his warrior spirit, was quite the poet. David understood better than most that God is sovereign over all and is worthy to be praised because of this. This led him to invoke God's presence daily, calling out to God in sorrow and joy, fear and celebration. The Psalms are a standing testimony to David's faith and God's response to that faith. David concludes Psalm 69 with asking God to once again save him. In faith, he praised God for what he would do before God ever did it. Today, we should mirror David's plea with our own. This week, take some time to pray that God would work in you so that you may be a living testimony for him like his servant David and his son Jesus. And when you're done asking, praise God in faith for the work he will do in your heart. So now, let's get to the questions we have for this chapter. Remember, these are to help us have deep and meaningful conversations about the topic at hand. Like always, I'm going to read the first question, and then it'll be on the screen. Pause the video and discuss together. Okay, here is question 1. Read John 2:13 through 17. Why were the money changers and sellers allowed to sell products in the temple courts? All right, now on to question 2. Why did Jesus drive the people who were selling things and changing money out of the temple courts? And finally, the third question. Think of some areas in your life where you might have allowed other influences to take priority, where Jesus is supposed to remain the sole focus. How can you take your thoughts captive and show David-like zeal for your Lord? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and have a great week.